Hey everybody, I'm Christina from the Challenger Learning Center, and I'm here to talk to you today about one of the awesome IMAX documentaries that we have called National Parks Adventure. This movie takes you on an amazing trip throughout the country, visiting various national parks and being able to see some of the incredibly beautiful landscapes that we have in this country and all that are all preserved by these national parks. Throughout the video, you see various landforms, and so for today's activity, we're going to be creating our own landform, and we're going to be looking to see how water is a very powerful agent for weathering and erosion. Now, if you have watched the movie, or maybe you know this just for the sake of knowing it, but the Colorado River, the water within that river is what actually carved out the Grand Canyon. Without that river flowing through that area, we wouldn't have the Grand Canyon. So water is one of the very powerful weathering and erosion agents that we have, and we're going to explore that a little bit more today. For this activity, you will need parchment paper, some water, 2 different colors of food coloring, a writing utensil, pen or marker works best, a wooden skewer or dowel, at least 1 mixing bowl. You may prefer to have 2 or 3 based on the activity, but you only need 1. A 1 cup measuring cup, salt, and flour. You might also want a mixing spoon. I'm not going to use a mixing spoon. I'm just going to mix everything up with my hands. However, we are going to be using food coloring. So if you don't want your hands to turn different colors, you probably want to get that mixing spoon. Hopefully you're not afraid to get your hands a little dirty, because we are going to be making salt dough today for this activity. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to mix together 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of salt, and 1 cup of water. Now, I'm going to be doubling up on this recipe, so I'm going to be using 4 cups of flour, 2 cups of salt, and 2 cups of water, just to make sure I have enough salt dough to do what I want to do. You can make your landform smaller or bigger depending on how much you want to make. It's completely up to you. Just make sure that the ratio is 2 cups flour, 1 cup salt, 1 cup water. So once I've mixed everything together in the bowl, I'm going to separate the dough out into 3 approximately equal balls of dough. And I'm going to give color, so I'm going to use the food coloring to color 2 of the different balls of dough. For the 3rd one, I'm just going to leave it the normal salt dough color because I'm going to be using blue and green for my other colors. They're different enough to where I can keep the normal color. After I mix everything together, I'm then going to make a landform. So I'm just going to form the dough into a landform on the parchment paper. And this landform can be anything you want it to be. Just make sure that there are some high spots, so some taller spots, and then some shorter spots as well, just to give it a little bit of a realistic feel, so to speak. So I've created my landform, and the next thing that we really need to do is we need to let it dry. But before it dries, I told you that we're going to need some wooden skewers. So what we're going to do with these is I'm personally going to break mine in half just because they're a little bit too tall for our landform. But I'm going to place them at different points in our landform, and then it's going to be time to let it dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in my oven at about 200 degrees for about an hour. And then I'm going to check on it, and basically I'm just going to make sure that it gets to a point where it's dry. Once it's dry, we can move on with our experiment. Our landform is now dry, and one thing I want to point out to you guys before I bring this outside and we finish up our experiment is that I have marked where the landform comes up onto the skewer, and we're going to compare that to where the landform is at the end of this experiment. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you mark your skewers where the landform comes up to on them. I've moved our landform outside to finish up this next part of the experiment, our final part of the experiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my hose and I'm going to put water on our landform to see what happens. Now remember, we talked about how water is a very powerful weathering and erosion mechanism on Earth. So we're going to see just how powerful it can be with our salt dough landform. I had the water running for probably about 5 minutes, and you can already start to see the fact that the landform is lower on those skewers than when we started off. Another indication that weathering and erosion has occurred is actually on our patio. So you can see little deposits of salt and flour. And deposits are a good way of knowing that weathering and erosion has happened, because these salt particles have moved from our landform and have settled themselves in between the crevices of these pebbles. So our experiment worked. It's just going to take a whole lot more time to get this completely worn down. Since we live in Florida, a good extension for this experiment, after you've purposely put water on your salt dough landform, leave it outside for the rain to take care of the weathering and erosion for you. Then you can observe over a few days the elements and how the landform holds up in the elements. Hope you guys like this experiment, and we'll see you guys next time.